Welcome to Bite-Sized Podcast on Operation Trojan Shield, the FBI criminal phone sting no one knows about.
And welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something pretty incredible, Operation Trojan Shield.
Incredible is one word for it.
It really is. It's this bizarre intersection of high-tech communication, organized crime, and, well, a really, really bold move by law enforcement.
Bold doesn't even cover it. I mean, the FBI secretly running a phone company.
Yeah.
Specifically for criminals. It sounds like fiction.
It does. It really makes you stop and think about, the lengths people go to for privacy and the lengths others go to pierce that privacy.
Okay, so let's maybe start with that feeling, right?
Yeah.
Wanting control over your digital stuff. I know I've fiddled around with different phones looking for something more secure. That urge to feel like your conversations are actually private.
It's a pretty universal feeling now, I think, in this digital age, the thought that anyone could just be listening in.
Yeah.
It's unsettling for most people.
Totally. I remember using an old iPod Touch just on Wi-Fi, like a makeshift secure line or something, and you hear about Graphene OS, Signal. People are always searching for that secure space.
And that's exactly where encrypted phones came in. They promised that security, that bubble where you could talk without worrying about eavesdroppers. Seemed like the perfect answer, especially if you needed real discretion.
Right. And then ANOM shows up.
Yeah.
But this wasn't just an app.
No, this was the whole package, a physical phone.
A purpose-built device. And the features they touted. Pretty advanced stuff.
What's really striking about ANOM is how they built this image, this aura of being totally uncrackable. It wasn't just, oh, we have encryption.
Right.
It was an entire ecosystem, end-to-end encryption, okay, standard enough. But then a custom OS, a fork of graphene, which is already known for privacy.
And they took out the GPS.
No GPS at all. Think about that.
Plus the phones looked, normal. Regular apps on the screen. Games, social media. Yeah.
Exactly. Dummy apps. And underneath, hidden, was the real chat app.
Yeah.
You had to type a code into the calculator.
Like a secret handshake.
Yeah, a digital secret knock. It was just layers upon layers designed to make users feel completely secure. They even threw in voice scrambling.
Wow.
An impenetrable communication bubble. That was the goal. Or the stated goal.
It's straight out of spy fiction, isn't it? And the guy behind it, this AFU figure, reportedly tech-savvy, links to the underworld and the marketing. They leaned right into it. Designed for criminals by criminals.
Which was, incredibly smart from a marketing perspective, if deeply cynical.
Right.
There's a genuine, lucrative underground market for phones that criminals believe are secure. They need these channels for planting serious stuff.
Which makes the next part just jaw-dropping. Because all that security, that end-to-end promise, turns out every single message had a silent listener.
This is the twist. The encryption wasn't technically a lie. Your message went from you to the recipient, encrypted.
Okay.
But every message was also secretly BCC'd, blind carbon copied to ANOM's own servers.
Whoa.
So you think it's end-to-end. It was more like end-to-end. And third end, they never told you about.
A ghost in the machine.
Yeah.
A ghost reading everything. The level of deception is wow.
So the big question is, why? Why would AFU, the creator, build this massive vulnerability into his own supposedly secure system?
Yeah, what's the angle?
Turns out AFU cut a deal with the FBI and the Australian Federal Police, the AFP.
He went to them.
He went to them and basically offered up the keys to the kingdom, access to every single message sent on his platform.
Why would he do that? Was he trying to get out of trouble himself?
Yeah.
Or just saw an opportunity?
It's hard to know for sure. Maybe he saw the writing on the wall, realized running a criminal phone network was too risky. Maybe it was a way to avoid prosecution. Maybe it was just a business decision in a very twisted way.
Whatever the reason, you said the AFP were involved.
Oh, they were apparently thrilled. They'd been hitting a wall with encrypted comms used by major crime groups in Australia, mafia types, biker gangs. This back door, it was exactly what they'd been hoping for.
So Operation Trojan Shield kicks off. When was this?
Around 2018, things started moving. The FBI and AFP now have this fire hose of data. Potentially. Well, yeah, there was one problem. Nobody was actually using ANOM yet.
Ah, right.
Right.
You've built the perfect trap, but there are no mice.
Exactly. So, step 2. Get the phones out there, into the hands of actual criminals.
How do you even do that?
Their strategy was creative. They targeted a known high-level drug trafficker in Australia, Domenico Catanzarati.
Okay.
The thinking was, if he starts using ANOM and people see him using it, they'll trust it. He'll basically be their first influencer, in a way.
A criminal influencer. Wow. Did they sell it to him?
They actually gave the first batch away for free.
Seriously? Like a free trial?
Kind of. A growth hack, but for organized crime. And it worked. Word got out this ANOM phone is the real deal, super secure, demand kicked up.
And the messages started flowing.
And the AFP and FBI were watching. Pretty much in real time. Imagine sitting there reading those conversations.
The kind of intelligence they must have been getting.
Unprecedented, really. The AFP saw plots for beatings, details of weapons drops, just an incredible insight, but that created a huge problem.
Yeah, the dilemma. You see crime about to happen.
Do you step in?
But if you do, how do you explain how you knew? You blow the whole operation.
Exactly. It's that classic intelligence problem. So they relied heavily on something called parallel construction, meaning they'd get the tip from ANOM, but then they'd have to build a completely separate legal case to justify acting on it. Find a normal reason for a traffic stop or a search warrant, never mentioning ANOM.
Which, okay, I get the necessity from their perspective, but it feels ethically murky, doesn't it? Law enforcement basically lying about where their evidence came from.
It definitely raises uncomfortable questions about transparency and procedure, even when the targets are serious criminals. It's a line.
Meanwhile, the FBI's role is getting bigger.
Much bigger. They weren't just getting data. They were essentially bankrolling ANOM, paying for servers, hardware. They were running the company behind the scenes.
So the FBI becomes a tech CEO for a criminal phone network. My head is spinning.
And AFU, the original creator, was apparently very good at keeping secrets. The actual developers working on ANOM, they had no clue.
What did they think they were building?
They thought they were building a secure communication tool for legitimate businesses, maybe with, like, archiving features for compliance reasons.
Okay, that makes a weird kind of sense. Like for finance or something.
Right. AFU compartmentalized everything. These developers thought they were building a secure corporate tool with an audit trail. They had no idea the audit trail was going straight to the FBI, and the corporation was international crime.
Wow. So the user base grows?
Spreads outside Australia, starts popping up in Europe.
Which brings in other police forces.
Yep. Swedish police, Dutch police. They start seeing the value, too.
And here's a crazy detail. Some of the criminals in Europe got so confident.
They actually tried to buy into ANOM, started calling themselves the CEO.
No way.
Yeah. Which, ironically, probably just made the platform seem even more legitimate within those circles. Like, see, it's ours now.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk about the FBI. Their main job is domestic, right?
Yeah.
U.S. soil.
Primarily, yes.
So them being so deeply involved in monitoring comms all over Europe, Australia, when there weren't many ANOM phones in the U.S. yet, that feels like a legal gray area, maybe?
It definitely pushed boundaries. The justification seemed to be that Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches apply differently, or not at all, to communications taking place entirely outside the U.S.
A loophole, basically.
You could call it that, but it raises bigger questions, you know? National sovereignty. Should one country's law enforcement be running surveillance on this scale in other countries?
Yeah.
There wasn't exactly a public debate about the FBI becoming sort of world police in the digital realm.
It's like breaking into someone's house overseas versus tapping a phone line here. It feels different, but the intrusion into private communication is still massive. This wasn't targeted wiretaps on specific individuals after getting a warrant.
No, this was scooping up everything on the network. Mass surveillance, essentially. Even if the network itself was largely used by criminals, it echoes some of the concerns raised by, say, the Snowden revelations.
Right. The sheer scale of collection. Even if 99% of users are criminals, what about that 1%? Or people just adjacent? Is it okay to sweep them all up in the same net?
That's the core ethical bind. Matthew Green, a cryptographer, raised that exact point. Is it fair to target an entire platform if usage varies? Where do you draw the line?
And the whole nothing to hide argument. It kind of falls apart when you think about needing privacy for things like dissent. Or just, living your life without the government potentially looking over your shoulder.
Absolutely. And interestingly, it seems the FBI was wary of directly monitoring ANOM messages inside the U.S. themselves.
Oh.
Legal hurdles, internal concerns. So often, they'd rely on their foreign partners, like the AFP, to monitor messages involving potential U.S. links and then share that intelligence back. A way to navigate domestic surveillance rules.
Sort of an intelligence sharing shuffle.
Something like that.
Okay, let's shift to the tech side. How were they actually managing all this data? Millions of messages.
They built a tool, an in-house FBI surveillance platform codenamed, get this, Holler iBot.
Holler iBot. Sounds almost cheerful.
Deceptively so. It was apparently a pretty sophisticated system. Green and black interface, visualized user connections, like a constellation of criminals.
And they couldn't read everything manually, right?
No way. Millions of messages. They used AI, artificial intelligence, partly running on Amazon's cloud, interestingly, to help analyze it all.
What was the AI looking for? Keywords, patterns?
All of that.
Right.
But critically, it was trying to identify immediate threats to life. Buried in all the drug talk and logistics were plans for violence, for murder.
That must have been intense. Trying to piece together threats from scattered clues.
Absolutely. Agents described it like solving a puzzle against the clock. A photo of a gun here, a vague location there, some coded slang, trying to figure out who the target was, where, when.
And dealing with criminal slang. That's a whole other layer.
Definitely. And sometimes, when they did intervene to stop a threat, the criminals would suspect a leak.
A rat in their midst.
Right. And immediately start planning new violence, sometimes against the suspected informant, sometimes just shifting targets. It was a dangerous, constantly shifting situation.
A grim reminder of what was actually being discussed on these secure phones.
Right.
Now, you mentioned the FBI's reluctance to monitor U.S. messages directly. Did ANOM phones actually make it into the U.S.?
Oh, yeah, they did reach the U.S.
But the FBI wasn't listening in the same way.
Not initially. There was pushback from higher-ups at the Department of Justice, the DOJ, agents on the ground, prosecutors. They wanted to monitor U.S. messages, but faced resistance.
Resistance based on what? Legal worries? Epic?
A mix, it seems. Some drug prosecutors in San Diego, where the case was centered, had serious questions about the whole setup. And a specific office in the DOJ, the Office of Enforcement Operations, or OEO, apparently stalled the approval process for monitoring U.S. comms for a long time.
So this massive global operation runs for years. What finally triggered the shutdown? Why June 7th, 2021?
A couple of things came together. There was a key court order related to servers in Lithuania that was about to expire.
Okay, a legal deadline.
Yeah, but also, frankly, ANOM was just getting too big. Too unwieldy for the FBI to manage effectively and secretly. It was starting to spiral.
Time to pull the plug.
Time to pull the plug. And the takedown itself was massive, coordinated globally.
Started in Australia, right? Because of the time difference.
Exactly. Kicked off in Australia and New Zealand, rolled across Asia, then Europe, and finally hit the U.S., all on the same day.
How many officers were involved?
Something like 10,000 law enforcement personnel worldwide. Think about coordinating that. It's staggering.
And the press conference afterwards. They must have been pretty pleased with themselves.
Oh, absolutely. They touted the huge numbers, hundreds of arrests, tons of drugs, weapons, cash seized. And they made a point of saying they had shattered criminal confidence in encrypted devices.
Okay, but
yeah,
that phrase, shattered criminal confidence, from a privacy standpoint, is that actually good?
That's the uncomfortable flip side, isn't it?
Yeah. If you're just a regular person wanting secure communication, does an operation like this make you feel less safe? Like, how do you know the secure app you're using isn't secretly run by the government?
It definitely introduces that element of doubt, that uncertainty. How can you trust any platform when something like ANOM existed? It blurs the lines.
And the FBI basically said, we might do this again.
They strongly hinted at it. And this wasn't the only takedown of supposedly secure platforms. We saw similar things happen with Sky ECC, Encrypted, law enforcement hacking into these networks.
So this is maybe the new normal in that world.
It certainly signals an ongoing battle. Law enforcement actively looking for ways around encryption or even creating the encrypted platforms themselves.
So let's wrap this up. The FBI runs a honeypot phone company for years. Yeah. Targeting criminals worldwide.
Intercepts millions and millions of messages detailing everything from drug deals to murder plots.
And then executes this enormous, coordinated global takedown involving thousands of officers.
It's an absolutely wild story. Feels like something you'd read in a thriller novel, not a real-world operation.
And it leaves you with some pretty heavy questions, doesn't it? About ethics, about surveillance, about where the lines are drawn in this digital fight against crime.
Definitely. What does this mean for the future of privacy? Can true digital security even exist when governments might be building the tools themselves? It makes you think.
It really does. Well, that was quite the deep dive.
It certainly was. A lot to process.
See you soon.